Hi, this is Rabbi Chaim Coffman. I want to welcome everyone to our 11th installment on the Torah portion of the week. We're holding by Parshas Vayigash, and in the Parsha there's still the story going on with Joseph and his brothers, and Joseph finally tells the brothers who he is, and they really can't believe it, which we're going to discuss. And then word gets back to Yaakov, and Yaakov wants to see his son before he dies, so Yaakov comes, and the rest of the family comes down. There's a whole genealogy of who comes down, etc. So there's quite a bit to speak about here. So I just want to speak right at the beginning, where in chapter 45, Yosef gets rid of everybody. He says Yosef couldn't restrain himself in the presence of all who stood before him. So he calls out, "Remove everyone from before me." No one remained with him. When Yosef made himself known to his brothers, he cries out in a loud voice that Egypt heard and Pharaoh's household heard. Yosef says to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers cannot answer him because they are left disconcerted before him. And so what happens? So in chapter 45, verses 1 to 3, Yosef gets rid of everybody that was there, right? All the servants or whatever that were there. And he tells the brothers that he's Yosef and is his father still alive. So what do the brothers do? The brothers couldn't answer because they were totally disconcerted. They were in shock, basically. So Yosef tells them that, I'm still alive. And they were in shock because they didn't think this was Yosef. Right? In other words, when they went down to Egypt, they were searching for him and looking day and night for him. But it never dawned on them that this, the one that was speaking to them so roughly, was Yosef, and and gave them this hard time. So one of the things you see, from that is, even though they did what they did, and we explained, last week's parsha how what they got punished for, etc., and why Yosef has to go through this whole thing to see if they've done proper tshuva, proper repentance. But they were the sons of Yaakov, so they held Torah to an extremely high level, and they understood what Torah was. So therefore, when Yosef speaks to them, and he speaks to them in such a rough voice and gives them a hard time, they couldn't imagine that this was Yosef. Now, there are a number of things here that I think are worthy to point out. One of them is the Rabbeinu Bachai brings down a medrash. The Rabbeinu Bachai says that he convinces the brothers that he is Yosef. They say, he said to them, "What are you looking for? I am Yosef. I'm Yosef, your brother." And they're like looking all around, like, Yosef's here. And they're like looking. And he says, no, look at me. I am Yosef, your brother. So at that point, the Rabbeinu Bachai says, immediately their souls went out from them. And they weren't able to answer. Why couldn't they answer? Because they were basically dead. They were in absolute shock that, the person standing in front of them and that is that saved them from the famine is none other than Yosef himself. So this totally shocked them to the point where the Rabbeinu Bachai says they basically died. Their soul went out of them. And they weren't able to answer. Well, that would be an interesting thing. If, why couldn't they answer? Well, because they were basically dead, right? Their soul went out of them. Interesting explanation. And then he goes further and he says, and this we're going to see how some of the other commentaries deal with it, but we're going to harp on this for a second, that he says, woe to what's going to happen at the Yom Adin, when the day of judgment, when God is going to judge us. Why? Not only that, he says, sorry, woe to the day of getting rebuke. Just like Yosef says to his brothers, I'm Yosef, is my father still alive? They can't answer him. So too, when we stand before him in judgment after 120 years, all the more so, how are we going to answer when God says, how come you did X, Y, or Z? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? Let's play the video. Let's see what you did in this world. We're going to be embarrassed. So too over here, just like the brothers weren't able to answer on that great day of rebuke, so too, how are we going to answer on that day of rebuke? So we know there's going to be judgments. We know there are going to be two movies that a person's going to see, right? The first movie is going to be what you did in this world. The second movie is going to be what I could have done, what my potential was. So if the brothers couldn't answer Yosef when Yosef gave this rebuke, so to speak, how are we going to answer? We better have good answers, and hopefully God's going to accept them. Otherwise, seemingly we're all in trouble. That's why, on a daily basis, we have to repent and do tshuva, for our bad actions. We certainly don't want to be embarrassed more than we probably will be, at that time. But there's another question. There's another question that has to be asked, and that is, when Yosef says, I'm Yosef, is my father still alive? There's an obvious question. The obvious question is, where is the rebuke? Yosef doesn't say, you're the ones that sold me, you good for nothing, you fill in the blank. He didn't say that. Yosef says, is my father alive? I'm Yosef, your brother, is my father alive? Says in the Tziv, Rav Naftali Tzvi Berliner, who is the head of the Volozhin Yeshiva, asked this question. Because he says that he only says, I am Yosef. He doesn't say anything else. Now, he said it in a shortened version. Right? Now, the reason why he doesn't say, and you're the ones that sold me, is because he doesn't want to embarrass them. Right? Just by saying, I am Yosef, is my father still alive, that's enough. We'll have to see, what this rebuke is, so to speak. But just saying, I'm Yosef, shouldn't be considered rebuke. At the same time, then the Tziv asks, why does he say, is my father still alive? What's the connection? He hasn't seen his brothers. He hasn't seen his brothers for years and years. And all of a sudden now he sees them, and he makes them go through this whole thing to see if they're really going to repent, if they're really going to do tshuva. And finally, he can't hold himself back after he sees his younger brother Binyamin. He can't hold himself back, and finally he says, fine, I can't take it anymore, and gets rid of all the Egyptians that were there, and he says, I am Yosef, is my father still alive? What's the second part? It's enough to say, I'm Yosef. He doesn't already know his father's still alive? That's a question in the Tziv. And what's the connection? It makes no sense. If you connect it to the first statement, I'm Yosef, period. By the way, is my father still alive? What's the connection? So he brings down this medrash, which we mentioned by the Rebbeinu B'chai. Woe to the day of judgment. If Yosef says to the brothers, I'm Yosef, is my father still alive? And the brothers basically die, and they come back to life, because they're totally in shock. Woe to us. It's going to be the day of judgment. When the day of judgment comes, what are we going to answer? So then the Tziv says, so where's the rebuke? Where in the world is this rebuke over here? So the Netziv says, when Yosef says, "Is my father still alive?" and he's not dead, why would he have died? What would you have thought? Joseph hasn't seen his father in 22 years. Yosef was closer to his father than any of the brothers. He was most similar to his father, more than any other brother. They went through similar trials and tribulations. He taught him the most Torah more than any of his brothers. Yosef was greater, according to Kabbalah, than all the brothers combined. So, where's the rebuke? The rebuke is my father still alive? 22 years he has not seen me. We were very, very close. Very, very similar in things that we went through. How could it be that he hasn't died from worrying about what happened to me? Because again, he was most beloved to his father. So the rebuke is, what? You didn't kill him? He didn't end up dying for 22 years because I was missing? Oh, that's pretty strong rebuke. And this was the rebuke, the Rabbeinu Bachai says, because even if you want to say, which we spoke about, that they judged him according to Torah judgment, and therefore, since they judged him, he deserved the punishment that he got. So the thief says, nonetheless, they should have had compassion and worried about their father. Because we saw that Yaakov is inconsolable, right? His kids, grandkids came to try and console him after he hears that Yosef dies, or that Yosef seemingly gets eaten up by an animal, or whatever the case is. Nobody can console him. Also, it's brought down that he lost his power of prophecy at this point because someone who's a prophet is not allowed to be sad. Right? You're not going to have one of the things that a person has to, cannot be when it comes to prophecy is sad. Prophecy does not come on a person that is sad. So for these 22 years, he was basically inconsolable. Since he was inconsolable, he didn't have prophecy at that time. So the question here is, even though the brothers judged, and according to Torah, Yosef deserved the punishment that he got, nonetheless, there's an added factor here. The added factor is, how is it going to affect their father? Even if, according to judgment of Torah, Yosef is guilty, nonetheless, what is it going to do to the health of their father? They didn't have compassion in that sense, and they didn't worry about it, right? Some of the commentaries say the fact that they heard him screaming in the pit, that pit was filled with scorpions and snakes. They wanted to see if his prophecies would come true, that if God willed it and he was a true, these dreams were true dreams of prophecy, so then fine. If not, then, that's what they meant when they said, we'll see what happens to his dreams. If he's true, then God's going to save him, right? If he's a true prophet. If he's not, then he's going to die. But when they heard him scream, etc., they showed lack of compassion at their level. Even, again, everything up until this point, they didn't understand they did anything wrong. Right? So the commentaries bring down that what they did wrong is that they were cruel when they should not have been as cruel. So you could look at it in two ways. Either they were cruel because when he was yelling and screaming and, telling them to take him out of the pit and he was afraid. That's one aspect they didn't have compassion. But here the Netziv says a totally different thing. They didn't have compassion. You know why? They didn't have compassion for their father. They didn't realize how it was going to affect them. How it was going to affect him. That's why, which we're going to see, when he comes in front of Pharaoh, And Pharaoh asked him how old he was because he never saw someone that old. He looked much older because of all the trials and tribulations he went through. One of them was the fact that his beloved son, that he loved more than all the other sons, was missing for 22 years. That could make someone old relatively fast. That's why the Netziv continues. And the Netziv says, that's why they weren't able to answer. Why weren't they able to answer? Because of embarrassment and fear. Right? They could have answered. Like they answered Yaakov. That they would have said that they could have had such an answer. Right? They could have said the same thing. Nonetheless, they weren't able to answer. And because they weren't able to answer, that was the greatest rebuke. So we know that from the story of Tamar and Yehuda, better that since Tamar does not embarrass Yehuda and say the ones who the staff and the signet, whoever these belong to, are the ones that got me pregnant. And they didn't say you're the one. She didn't say you're the one who did it. You. He understood from himself. So the commentaries say that a person would rather jump in a fiery furnace than embarrass someone in public. So he didn't embarrass them, right? He didn't embarrass them, so to speak. He gave them rebuke, but he gave it very subtly, and they understood for themselves. So in this case, they weren't able to answer. They didn't have an answer. Right? Even if they did everything according to Torah, etc., they still couldn't answer why they did what they did to their father. They missed the point of the anguish that it was going to cause the father, Yaakov. Now, my Rebbe, Arav Agon Ramosha Sternbuch Shlita, brings down this medrash, and he says that in order to give rebuke, you don't need to give such strong rebuke. You don't need to hit someone over the head and bang and bang and bang, in order to give rebuke. The reality is, it's enough to say something, even if it's not in a hard way, that's going to cause somebody to understand what's going on. All right, they'll understand they're being rebuked. So here, he says like this, that the reality is, you give rebuke as long as the person can hear it. If the person can't hear it, because in this generation, right, we don't know how to rebuke. So there's no obligation, per se, to rebuke. There are times, though, that even if a person's not going to listen, there are times when we have to make a stand. When we have to make a macha, when we have to stand up against something, even if nobody's going to listen. Because we don't want to have it on our soul, so to speak. When we get upstairs after 120 years, God's going to say, this happened and that happened, how come you didn't say anything? So Rabbi once told me that many years ago, there are all these non-Jewish Russians that came into Israel, and nobody was saying anything. So he made a protest against that, and it was clear that all these Russians, most, high percentages, not all of them, coming, weren't Jewish. And because of that, it caused other problems. Certain other problems. Nonetheless, there were religious Jews that knew what was going on and still let them in. So my Rebbe organized a protest because, you have all these non-Jews infiltrating the land of Israel, right? You don't want that. You want to make the land holy. You don't want to, you don't want all these non-Jews coming that are not going to, certainly not going to keep Torah or, or do worse things. Now, so I asked him, do you really think that the protest did anything? Like, what was the purpose of organizing people, getting people to speak, and all this? What was the purpose? So he looked at me and he said the purpose was that after 120 years, I'm not going to get upstairs and God's going to say, Moshe, how come you didn't protest? How come you knew this was going on? You didn't say anything. Even if it's not going to be listened to, sometimes you got to stand up, depending on the situation. Technically speaking, if a person would see someone, a Jew, driving down the street on Shabbos or any festival, a person should jump out and scream. Not because, what's that going to do? You're going to scream, Shabbos! What's it going to do? Nothing. It's going to make it's going to make them hate you more. And, it'd be one thing, you invite them in for a meal, this, that, that's something else. Screaming at someone Shabbos is not going to do anything. But the question is, why, for us, we should be screaming. Why? Not because, we just, all of a sudden we start, throwing stones and, doing things like that to show what they're doing is wrong. Like, like that's really going to make someone think about their actions. The idea of screaming doesn't mean screaming out loud, when someone does that. It's basically screaming to yourself, because yourself has to understand that when your soul comes in contact with this, and it doesn't scream out, and it doesn't bother you that somebody is doing something to break Shabbos, right? Whether, they're mowing the lawn, whether they're, driving somewhere, it doesn't matter, whatever the case is. Our inner soul, if we're holding where we're supposed to be, should look at that and scream. Why? So the reason is because if you say, oh, okay, the person doesn't know, or a person, whatever reason, they don't keep Shabbos, they don't keep Shabbos like they should. So by me witnessing that, what does that do? So if I don't react, and it doesn't make me feel bad, so to speak, when you see someone do that, then that means there's a lack in me. You're going to say there's a lack in me, I should go around screaming, like screaming to myself every time you see something like that. If you don't, or you don't make some sort of effort, to strengthen yourself in such a situation, what happens is that you start to look at Shabbos not being that important. You're going to say, what do you mean? I've been keeping Shabbos for 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. I'm not going to think Shabbos is so important because I saw someone mowing the lawn, because I saw him, watering his grass. I saw him drive somewhere, whatever the case is. That means to me Shabbos isn't important. So the answer is that it weakens your resolve. If you, in other words, it doesn't, it's not going to stop you necessarily, from not keeping Shabbos. And we see that, this person, there's no zap treatment, right? So, person who doesn't keep Shabbos, there's a severe punishment, but we don't see that. So, there are a lot of different things going on at the same time, where if we witness it, it weakens me. If I don't like scream out to myself, and say, what a terrible thing, doesn't understand the importance of Shabbos. It has to make you feel bad. You have to be able to give over something, because if not, that means your soul is dead. That means that there's something flawed in your observance of Torah. We don't necessarily look at things, in that way. But you see, when the Torah was given on Mount Sinai, it wasn't like there were 4 or 5 different rows. If you went through this door, you got all the mitzvahs. If you went through the next door, you got part of the mitzvahs. If you went through the third door, you didn't get anything. Right? So when the Torah was given, it was about doing all the commandments, that we're able to do. Obviously, if a Jew is a Yisrael, they're not a Kohen or a Levi. They can't do what a Kohen or a Levi does. A Kohen can't do what a Levi does. A Levi can't do what a Kohen does. So the mitzvahs also don't apply. We don't have a temple today. Can't bring sacrifices. Right? There are a number of things we can't do. Because if you're not in the land of Israel. B, you don't have a temple, so, we can't sacrifice. C, there are things we can't do if you're a Yisrael, you can't do as a Kohen or a Levi, vice versa. So, nonetheless, there are plenty of things we are obligated to do. Because we're obligated to do them, if we don't do them, then there's a price to pay. You see, but what happens? What happens when people start to do what they want? They start to change things, turn it into a pretzel, so to speak. So that's not Torah anymore. Torah is absolute, as the Rambam says, in the 13 Principles of Faith. If it's not absolute, if there are not moral issues that are absolute, and that they go from generation to generation, if it changes at any time, that's not Torah. That's man-made. That's making Torah in the image of God, not the other way around. Or, sorry, let's rephrase that. It's Torah in the image of man. Or man makes God in their image, so to speak. So that's a tragedy. We see what the tragedy is. So in this case, we could look at someone mowing their lawn on Shabbos in, one of two ways. Or maybe a few different ways. You could look at them and say, oh, it's tragic. They never had a proper Jewish education. They don't know about the seriousness of Shabbos. What a terrible thing. And I'm going to move on. Right? You walk by, you'll see what they're doing, whatever. And you're going to say, well, he can do what he wants. He's got free choice. And it doesn't affect you that much. If at all. You're used to it. Or, you could say, how could a person do such a thing? The holiness of Shabbos, start bringing out all these ideas about what Shabbos is and what it represents. Again, to yourself, not to anybody else. Especially not the person. And what are you doing? You're strengthening yourself. Because if you see it, it has a negative effect, even if we think it doesn't. Alright, that's the other way. That's the other way of looking at it. And that is a way that a person can strengthen themselves and their observance. Because if you look at it as a natural occurrence, that these people don't keep Shabbos or whatever, and say, okay, they do that and we do this. We're different than them. And then life goes on. Pass the pickles. Let's have a turkey sandwich. It doesn't mean anything if it doesn't affect you. So you run into that serious issue. Because if you don't scream out to yourself, it weakens your resolve. You think, oh, this is normal. This is nature. Right? That's something to think about. So we've spoken a number of times, about this other idea. That Yosef says, I'm alive, and they can't answer. So it's a parable to us after 120 years. What are we going to answer? How are we going to answer? When you're a pure soul, there's no discussion. You understand what the truth is, at least as far as, I understand that. A proverbial soul is going to shrug their soul shoulders. I don't know exactly how that works. They're going to, how do you do that as a soul, not as a human? I don't know. But be that as it may, that's going to be the embarrassment. That's what a part of hell is. Because you're going to be totally embarrassed of what you've done. So just like the brothers couldn't answer Yosef, how are we going to answer at the end, when God gives us rebuke? On that day of judgment. Not going to be pretty. So, I'm always fond of saying, we want to strive and do everything we can in this world. We're working hard day in and day out, in order to be closer to God, to do what He wants us to do. We have failures, no question. And sometimes we get knocked around pretty good. And a lot of times we do it to ourselves. Be that as it may, you pick yourself up and you move forward. But you see, you don't want to get upstairs, after 120 years and go through more embarrassment than you have to. We're all going to have it at some level. Some more, some less. But see, at the end of the day, we want to minimize that. We want to live to that potential, whatever it is. You don't want to hear, oh, look what you did over here. Look what you could have done. You were just lazy. You don't want to hear that. When you see that second movie, that'll be enough. How are we going to answer? That's one idea. The end of the Parsha, Yaakov comes down. He comes down and he meets Pharaoh. And it says in chapter 47 that Yosef brings Yaakov, his father, and presented him to Pharaoh. And Yaakov blessed Pharaoh. Pharaoh says to Yaakov, how many of the days of the years of your life? Yaakov answered, the days of the years of my sojourns when I traveled have been 130 years. Few and bad have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not reached the life spans of my forefathers, the days of their sojourns. Yaakov blessed Pharaoh and left Pharaoh's presence. Again, chapter 47, verses 7 to 10. Now, there are a number of things here. One is that Pharaoh says to Yaakov, how many of the days of your life? Why? Because Yaakov looked extremely old. Older than he appeared. So, it was strange. Pharaoh, until this time, people didn't really get old. They just died. They didn't appear like so much older, etc. They just died. Yaakov looked a lot older. Wasn't weaker per se, but he looked much older. Right? Simple explanations, because of all the trials and tribulations he went through, he had it rough. He had it extremely rough. So because he had it rough, it caused him to age. I'm sure we know of people that have had, rough times in their lives that, some people may have gone white, their hair's gone white premature. Could be a sign of wisdom also, but some, because of, trials and tribulations, got older much quicker, etc. Right? So that's one idea. We'll see what some of the commentaries say. The other thing is, why does Yaakov over here say that the days of my years, have been 130. Few and bad. They've been few and bad. What do you mean few and bad? What about everything that God, gives the person is for the best? What do you mean few and bad? Right? So we'll see that when he says that, simple explanation is he loses, 30 odd years of his life, and he doesn't live as long as his forefathers because he said that. Because my life is bad. My life is hard. Right? It's a little bit, it's a little bit hard to fathom, someone as righteous as Yaakov, right? Why he would have said such a thing. So the Rabbeinu Bachai here says that his years are not the same as his forefathers. Why does he mention this? It means to say that it's different because he lived in this world 130 years. And it's the way of righteous people that think of themselves as strangers. When he says they're living in this world, it means they're living as strangers in this world. Right? So we had a lot of difficulty, and because of the suffering that he went through, it wasn't called life. Right? When a person suffers tremendously in life, it's not like he's called alive. So there are a few things here. One is, the Rebbeinu Bachai says, that he's like a stranger in this world. Why a stranger? Because, as Mishnah Pirkei Avos says, we're living in this world as, this world is like transcendent for the next world. It's like a preparation. Not transcendent, but it's like a preparation, for the next world. So this world is only temporary. Even though, many live like it's the ultimate, this world is only temporary. So he's looking at himself as a stranger in this world. Right? Play on the words here. As a stranger in this world. Because this isn't the real world. Right? This is an upside down world. This is a world of falsehood. World of Hollywood. Right? The world of nothingness. But see, it's preparation for the next world. And the way you prepare yourself is by doing Torah mitzvahs for the next world. Be that as it may. They're looking at their tenure. Right? Righteous people look at their tenure in this world as temporary. So that means that whatever they do, they're already focusing, on the next world. This is just preparation, the way station, so to speak. So that's getting them ready. So, according to Rabbeinu Bachai, he loses out in years because of all the suffering. Right? The suffering basically kills him. And one way to look at it. Now, there's an interesting explanation by the Netziv. The Netziv over here says, when he's talking about life over here, he says, how many days are the years of your life? Again, because he looks much older than he was. But the Netziv explains that the reason here is, how many days of the years of your life were you successful? Because there are times where a person lives, right? He's got years of life. There are times he doesn't have years of life, right? When they're going through difficulty and a person's suffering. Doesn't matter, maybe from livelihood, maybe from illness. But when a person suffers, it's like they're not alive. So goodness is when we look at life as going, that's called life, when things are going okay. So that's what Pharaoh asks over here. He asks Yaakov, what are the years, how many days, the years of your life, were they used to the best of your ability? Interesting thing. In other words, if a person suffers, regardless of what the suffering is, it's not considered life. So you might say, why not? Consider it more than life, to the extent that we'll say if a person has a difficulty, and whatever the difficulty is, that difficulty is making him a better person. And that's going to help him grow into who he's going to be, and whatever that thing is. So the trials and tribulations are a good thing. The suffering's a good thing. Makes them into who they are, makes them stronger. The problem is that when you're going through it, even if you overcome it, at that time you're so worried about that particular thing again, whatever it is. You go through it, and it's like you're not alive. People see you, you do things, you function, but at the same time you can be totally broken. And when a person goes through that and lives like that, that's not called life. Right? The suffering is not called life, even though it helps make the person who they are. Now, what does it mean? Then Steve says, what does it mean that they had bad days? Right? Or they were evil, so to speak. Because he lived in exile. That's an interesting idea. Right? Avram, Yitzhak lived in the land of Israel. He lived in exile. And he didn't see as much success because he lived in exile. Which is interesting. What? Someone who lives in exile can't live in the land. It's not called success. So here the Netziv says that he felt he didn't, his father and his grandfather, they lived and, to ripe old age. And, even though Avram went through tremendous trials, Yitzhak had his own trials. But see, they lived in the land. So the success that they had was that they were in the land. So Yaakov says, why was it bad? Why don't look at it as bad? Look at it as bad because I didn't live in the land. They're going to say that, that the mitzvah in the world is to live in the land of Israel. Obviously, it's one of the 613. Right? But it's not a mitzvah if I don't do it, then, I transgress, like if a man doesn't put on tefillin, something like that, on a day he's obligated to. Right? He didn't do it, so he misses out. And he nullifies a positive command. Here too, if he doesn't live in the land of Israel, also nullifies a positive command. But there are reasons why a person can't live in the land. Right? Livelihood, get married, learn Torah. There are a number of reasons why a person can't, for whatever reason, live in the land. They're going to fry in hell forever? No. If they could get there and they didn't live there, fine. It's like, it's like any other mitzvah. Problem is, some people make it into the mitzvah. It's like all the 613 commandments, all one side, 612, and this on the other side, which is comparable to all the mitzvahs. Right? There were great tzaddikim. Great righteous people never lived in the land. So it's not, you got to say the Vilna Gaon, Rav Elijah of Vilna, the Chofetz Chaim, they were second rate because they didn't live in Israel. A little bit hard to say. The idea, though, my Rebbe's father always used to say that better to be a Jew outside of the land wanting to come to live in the land than a Jew living in the land and wanting to live outside the land. Right? If you're living in the land and your desires, oh, I just want to live in France. I can't imagine, but I just want to live in France. I want to live in America. I want to live, I want to live, somewhere where it's easier. It's easier to live. It's not as difficult as it is here in many ways. That's not good, right? Certainly not good. So the suffering that he went through, he wants to say a lot of it has to do with the fact that he didn't have that success because he didn't live in the land. The last thing here, which I'll mention, is what my Rebbe here brings down, and that first thing is that because he says it in such a way, God had a claim against him. He said, "My years are evil; they're bad, so to speak." He's punished, and because of that, he takes off 33 years of his life, because his father lived 180. Yaakov only lived 147. Right, they took off 33. Right, 147, 33 is 180. Look at that, I even did that without a calculator. And the reason he's punished is because if someone is righteous, how can you say that what God did is bad? How can you say the way God runs the world is bad? Right, that's a little bit hard to say. If you are truly, if you're truly righteous. Now he has a different way of looking at it. It's really, he wants to say it's a way of anova, the way of humility. Why? Where do you see humility here? He says, my days were bad because I was so busy going through trials and tribulations, I wasn't able to serve God in the optimal way. I didn't, I couldn't sit and learn the way I needed to. I couldn't educate the way I needed to. He went through such difficult times that it wasn't the same. His service of God wasn't the same. That's why it's bad. Right? He was afraid Esau's going to kill him. He had to flee. Eliphaz, his son, takes all his wealth. He goes to Lavan, right? And he lies to him, etc. He went through all these different things. And because he went through them, it took away from his service to God. So there's a claim against him. Even if that's true, you don't call it bad. We want to answer up why he might have said it's bad. But you see, we don't even understand Yisurim, suffering. Suffering is a tremendous thing for a person. Nobody wants it. That's how we grow when we're given trials and tribulations. Nobody wants it though. So here, what is Yaakov saying? Don't give me any of these trials and tribulations. Let me serve you the way I need to, and that the way I need to grow, and that's going to help me become closer to you. So God judges the righteous like a hair's breadth. So even if that's true, and he says, I want to serve God in the highest way possible, don't give me any of these trials and tribulations. So according to his level, God took him to task. And God says, I give trials and tribulations for a reason. And even for the righteous, they're going to have trials and tribulations. Don't tell me you want to sit and learn and be able to do what you want to do, to the highest possible level, etc. Like, don't tell me that. I give trials and tribulations for a reason. So there's a claim. Again, a little bit hard to understand. There's a claim where he's saying that don't ask that. I run the world the way I do. I'm going to have you reach your potential in other ways. So one of the things that I think is important in prayer, and when we ask for our needs, one of the things we have to keep in mind is that we want to pray for things that are going to be good for us. We may think, having a lot of money is going to be good for us. We may think, you fill in the blank is going to be good for us. And we pray for them, but it may not be good for us. God knows what's good for us, and that's what he gives us. However he does it, and however we're supposed to react to it, or whatever the case is. So when we pray, especially during the week, obviously not on Shabbos, because we're not going to ask for our own needs on Shabbos, because all our needs are taken care of on Shabbos, because everything's already done ahead of time. But during the week, we should pray for things that are good for us. Even if we don't think they're good for us, we should pray that God gives us things in his eyes that are good for us. Doesn't mean we don't want good things for our spouses and for our children and for our families and extended families, etc. But whatever's given to us personally, let it be the best for us. Let me understand that it's the best for us, and don't make me ask for things, or don't allow me to ask for things that aren't good for me. Obviously, God's not going to stop you from doing that. You have free will. Right? But one thing we have to keep in mind is that when we want to ask for what is good for us, not what we necessarily think is good. The reason is because what we necessarily think is good may not in essence be good for us. So that's what we should pray on a daily basis, again, except on Shabbos or a festival, that when we put in our own personal prayers, we ask that we should ask for the right things. There are plenty of things we'll ask for we don't have to, even think about. Health and livelihood, whatever. But we want to pray for things that are good for us, even if we don't necessarily understand why God puts us in certain situations, or whatever the case is. He knows what he's doing. So, that's part of also of Emunah B'Tachon, belief in God, where Yosef over here says, when he tells the brothers, don't worry, everything you did came out for the good, because you had to come down to Egypt, and there's a whole bigger thing going on, how they had to come down to Egypt in order to be redeemed, etc. And Yosef understood that, but not going into that per se. He says God runs the world. Obviously, this is what he wanted. Okay, he didn't do things in the optimal way, and you're held accountable for it. At the same time, God runs the world. So I don't have any claims against you, because this is what God wanted. This is how he orchestrated it. This is how he got you and my father to come down here. This is going to ultimately lead to the redemption that's going to get the Jewish people out of Egypt. But it had to start somewhere, and this is the way it was. So he says, don't blame yourselves. God orchestrated the whole thing. And that's something in our own lives, which we have to look at, which is a very difficult thing to look at, because the reality is whatever we go through, God is orchestrating it. And we have to understand, God knows what he's doing, even if we don't have a clue as what's going on behind the scenes. We don't know. Right? But the ultimate thing is it's good, and he's running the show. Anyone interested? I also give classes for conversion. You can take a look at my Facebook page, Beyond Orthodox Conversion to Judaism, my blog at rabbichaimcoffman.blogspot.com, RABBICHAIMCOFFMAN.blogspot.com. Wishing everyone a good Shabbos.